just like, wow. Wonder why they picked that one.
Except everyone uses a cell phone. Seriously, why are we not?
Okay, with that, we'll call the regular meeting of Township Council for the purpose of a public hearing to order. Of course, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and in particular, our relationships with the Casey, Kwantlen, Matsquit, and Semiahmoo First Nations. Mr. Richardson, with that, the preamble.
A public hearing is a statutory requirement under Section 464 of the Local Government Act and must be held before third reading of a community plan, land use contract amendment bylaw, heritage designation bylaw, or heritage revitalization agreement bylaw. During a public hearing, council acts in a quasi-judicial role for the purpose of allowing persons who believe their interest in property is affected by a bylaw, permit, or other matter to make representations to council, either orally, by written submission, or to add comments to or elaborate upon correspondence that may have already been presented to council concerning the bylaws. It is important to note that council is not able to receive any additional information on the bylaws following the public hearing as dictated by case law. The hearing procedure involves an explanation from the Community Development Division on the purpose of the proposed bylaws and to hear from individuals regarding the bylaws. In order to ensure that all interested parties have a reasonable opportunity to be heard, speakers are requested to keep representations as brief and succinct as possible and no longer than 5 minutes in duration, excluding the time required for questions from council. Speakers will be asked to state their name, neighborhood, and city for the record. And if referring to prepared remarks, to submit copies of these to the township clerk. Decorum must be always maintained. This includes refraining from applause, booing, or heckling. To assist with large numbers of speakers, individuals must advise the township clerk and sign the speakers list prior to the commencement of the public hearing. The names on the speakers list will be read out during the hearing. Individuals who have already addressed council and wish to add further submissions will wait until the people that have not yet addressed council have had an opportunity to speak. All submissions and speaker lists are considered part of the public record. Council members should not express their views nor debate the bylaws. However, they may question speakers to clarify particular points in their submissions. Council may consider third reading or third reading and final adoption at this meeting or at its next regular meeting. Thank you.
Okay, so there was a couple of items that I intended to raise under other business earlier that I simply forgot to do. And I think they are timely and something I'd prefer to get on with. So I'm going to suggest the council can consider this when we adopt the agenda. I'd like to add 2 items to the agenda. One is to consider racket sports at the Fort Langley Community Park. And the second item is to consider 2 spray park benches at the Fort Langley Community Park. So with that, I'll move adoption of the agenda as amended, seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on the agenda? Councillor Kunst.
Yeah, only that we're in a public hearing so that we're allowed to sort of like pop that into a public hearing.
Ms. Bauer?
The procedure bylaw does allow other items during a public hearing.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, call the question on A1 as amended. That carries unanimously. Ms. Bauer, could you please mark Councillor Richter absent? Mr. Richardson, item B1.
Well, thank you, Worship. The subject Central Gordon Estate Neighborhood Plan Amendment and rezoning applications pertain to a proposed development consisting of 31 townhouses at 6920 204 Street. The 1.5 acre site is designated multifamily in the Willoughby Community Plan. And Townhouse, Street Greenway, and Visual Street in the Central Gordon Estate Neighborhood Plan. This air photo depicts a site located on the east side of 204 Street, south of 70th Avenue. Proposed Central Gordon Estate Neighborhood Plan Amendment Bylaw 6135 amends the density permitted in the townhouse designation on a site-specific basis from 20 to 21 units per acre. Rezoning Bylaw 6136 rezones the subject site from suburban residential 2 to comprehensive development zone 214 to accommodate the proposal. This slide indicates the proposed site plan with ultimate vehicular access from 204 8th Street. Staff recommends support of Central Gordon Estate Neighborhood Plan Amendment Bylaw 6135 and rezoning Bylaw 6136, subject to 11 conditions listed on page 8 of Council's agenda. Your Worship, a total of 123 notices were mailed out. No written submissions have been received, and there were no individuals noted on the speakers list.
Right. Are there any submissions from the public on item B1? Just in case you want to make a submission, sir, I've got to ask the questions. Is there any submissions from the public on item B1? And then for a third and final time, are there any other submissions from the public on item B1? Not seeing none, I'll close the public portion of the public hearing. Is the proponent here? No, I'm not seeing to make any submissions on item B1. So with that, I'll close the public hearing on item B1. Does anybody wish to move consideration of public third reading? Moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Call the question on consideration of third reading of B1. That carries unanimously. Does anybody wish to move the recommendation for third reading? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there any discussion on B1? Seeing none, call the question on B1, third reading. That carries unanimously. Move on to B2. Is that what we're going to label them? We're going to be C1 and C2. Is
We're
that
gonna go
correct?
with C1
yeah,
and C2.
C1 and C2. So C1 is a motion here that the operating hours, this is the reading of the motion, that the operating hours and potential usage for the racket sports courts adjacent to Fort Langley Community Park be consistent with those throughout the Township of Langley. Is there a second? Seconded by Councillor Rint. Is there any discussion on that? Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. The consistent with other facilities, what are those hours through yourself to staff?
Mr. Richardson, I don't think we have all the staff here for some of these, but I believe we're dawn to dusk for most racket courts throughout the Township of Langley.
Correct, Your Worship. Those are the regular park hours unless otherwise specified, Your Worship.
That's correct.
Okay, in light of that, since I think this set of courts is an exception in my mind, and it's closer to residences than I think most of the other racket sports courts that I know of, I would, after any other speakers, have an amendment to change the hours.
There are no other speakers, so go ahead.
So my amendment would be to strike the words consistent with other courts, or whatever the exact wording was.
Yeah, it was that the operating hours and potential usage for the racket court sports be consistent with those throughout the Township of Langley. So you could do an amendment depending on what your intent is. I could help you.
Effectively, the amendment would be to have the ending hours, or I'll say the operating hours of the courts be from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Is there a seconder to that amendment?
Seeing none.
Say it again. What's the motion again?
The motion would be for the operating hours of these courts specifically to be from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Great. I will second that. Go ahead and speak to it if you wish.
I think it
You think
speaks
you're
for
good?
itself.
Councillor Kunst?
Yeah, so is this the Fort Langley Community Park that we're talking about where there's a resident that is concerned about pickleball right behind her house, or are we talking about a different park?
No, there's the two tennis courts / pickleball racket sports courts that are on Fine Arts property adjacent to Fort Langley Community Park
Okay, so
that
this
have been the
is,
subject of multiple delegations.
right, so this is not the park that, or the court that there is a person that is really not wanting to have pickleball.
No, those are those courts.
Okay, so could we define it just to tennis?
Well, right now we're just dealing with the motion to restrict the hours more than the rest of the Township of Langley, and after that, depending on that, you could move a motion to restrict it only for tennis.
So I don't know how we just like tell one person that they can only play tennis and you can't play pickleball, but I don't know.
Well, that's what's happening currently.
I know, but could we have a little more time to discuss this, or like?
You could certainly move deferral to the next regular meeting of council. I was
might
trying to
want to do that just so that I can like understand a little bit more about what's kind of at stake here.
Yeah, so here we are. I think Ms. Bauer has dictated it down. There it is there. The amendment. So I'm trying to go back. What is your question, Councillor Kuntz? Are you looking to, we're on the amendment that Councillor Pratt has moved. So if you have other questions about the motion, we could deal with those after the amendment.
So I think we had there was a lot of conversation in the last meeting about there was concern about one, neighbor that, was dealing with the fact that pickleball is like right outside her house, and this was not something that she was particularly happy about. And then I think we got an email about people playing tennis, which I feel like is a little bit different than pickleball. So I'm just trying to figure out what we're doing here, because we have said no pickleball, and now we're going to say yes pickleball.
Yeah, so the motion that was moved was to allow pickleball, essentially all racket sports, consistent with other racket sports courts throughout the township. Now the amendment is to restrict the hours of both pickleball and tennis.
Okay, I'll just wait and see what other members of council are thinking.
Councillor Martins?
Yeah, thank you. Again, because didn't have this one in advance, I just did a quick Google search, so I don't want to completely assume this is a correct source, but maybe a guidance. When I hear dawn to dusk, right now in Langley, BC, today dawn is at 4:23 a.m. and dusk is at 9:57 p.m. and we're working towards June 21st typically is the longest day of the year, so those hours are going to slightly extend. So essentially, just after 4 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night is when you're recommending all racket sports happen in that court. And again, I'm thinking about the resident nearby and the concerns raised. I appreciated Councillor Bailey's comments at the last meeting after the delegation about that. So I worry, I think dawn to dusk is too long for anybody living that close proximity to those courts for any sports. And then I believe Councillor Pratt, though, you suggested 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. and I almost feel that's maybe too restrictive. I'm sort of thinking somewhere in the middle. I would say like 8 a.m. because I'm thinking about hot days till 7 p.m. I don't know. So I guess I kind of appreciate Councillor Coote's comments about maybe a bit more time to kind of digest this and sort this out. Because I guess I'm not really happy with either. So those are my thoughts.
Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I had the chance this morning, went by West Langley courts. Didn't get the chance to go to Fort Langley this weekend. Courts were packed at West Langley at 9 a.m. And it was raucous, to say the least. In a good way. I'm happy to see the courts well used. So yeah, my amendment is intended to strike a compromise. It might be an overly restrictive compromise, fair enough. But for myself, I thought 7 days a week, that was a fair enough time for those courts to be used by both tennis and pickleball. So happy to see what happens no matter what.
Right, so seeing no other speakers, call the question on the amendment. That amendment is defeated with Councillor Martins, Councillor Rent, Mayor Woodward, Councillor Bailey, Councillor Coons, Councillor Ferguson opposed. So now back to the main motion. Is there any other speakers? Seeing none, I'll call the question on C1. C1, that is carried with Councillors Martin, Councillor Bailey, Councillor Coons opposed. Let's move on to C2. Ms. Bauer, you could try to dictate this one. I did watch back the meeting where there was an attempt to acquire benches, so I thought we would just acquire the benches. The council authorized $15,000 from the capital projects reserve for 2 benches at the spray park within Fort Langley Community Park. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on that? Councillor Martins.
Only to say thank you. Appreciate that.
That's great. Call the question on C2. That carries unanimously. Get a motion to terminate. Moved by Councillor Rent, seconded by Councillor Bailey. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Thanks.